door here, so if you still want to pick one of those up, we should have some extra copies. Before we get into introductions of the board member and staff members, this is a 7-member board. We have one vacant position at this time because Bill Gray, our long-standing chair of the zoning board, resigned after last month's meeting as he took his oath as the new city councilman for Ward 1 here just last week or so. So with his election and promotion, we currently have a vacant seat on the board. We also have 2 members of the board who could not be here today. They had some schedules that changed rapidly. So we have 4 members here today. So we have enough members to have a quorum here, but we'll go over a little bit of the procedures here in a moment on how that's going to work. The board members that we do have here that are present today, on the audience's right, we have Jake Christensen and Linda Westergaard. On the audience's left, Cindy Smith. I'm Mel Pins, Vice Chair of the board. And with us for city staff, our legal counsel to my left is Roger Brown. Also Bert Drost, City Planner. Eric Lundy, City Planner. Anu Minhas, City Planner. And Sue Ann Donovan, our Zoning Enforcement Officer. Now to give you a little background on how we do things here and how the procedure works, this board is required to base its decision in each case upon the criteria established by law for the type of relief sought by the applicant. The law applicable to each case is identified in the written staff report, which is part of the agenda. If the facts, as determined by this board, demonstrate that the criteria established by law for granting the relief has been satisfied, then the board must grant the relief. Otherwise, the board must deny the relief. All speakers who wish to speak today are requested to focus their comments upon those facts that demonstrate whether or not the criteria established by law has been satisfied. And the way we'll conduct our agenda today, each appeal will be announced in the order on the agenda, and the staff will present a brief explanation of the appeal. Any written comments received by the staff prior to the hearing will be distributed to the board here, and we've got some of that, or otherwise identified and entered into evidence. If you wish to speak on an issue, all speakers must speak from the podium and begin their presentation by first giving both their name and address, either where you live or your place of business. The appellant or representative of the applicant is allowed to speak first, and they'll be allowed 10 minutes to present their appeal. Anyone else present in support of the appeal will then be allowed 5 minutes to present their comments. Anyone present in opposition to the appeal will then also be allowed 5 minutes each to present their comments. The applicant will then be allowed 3 minutes for rebuttal or other closing comments. What we'll do then is the meeting, that agenda item will be closed to public comment, and the board will deliberate the request and make a decision. And we will do that here today, unless for some reason it would be deferred or withdrawn. If your appeal is approved, we ask that you wait until tomorrow to go down to the Permit and Development Center to apply for any building permits or the other variances that we grant. We have a consent agenda. Items listed on the consent agenda will not be individually discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report. We'll do that unless there'd be some individual or member of the board that requests that we remove the item from the consent agenda and separately consider it under the public hearing agenda. The decisions of this board can only be appealed in the Polk County District Court. So if you believe you've been harmed by an error made by this board, your only remedy is to seek relief through the district court within 30 days of the filing of the board's decision and order. If you believe the zoning regulations applied by this board are wrong, you may petition the City Council to change those regulations. Any material written or otherwise presented or used today as part of any presentation will become a permanent part of the record and will not be returned. So you either have to give us the items you present here or we'll make some copies. But if you want to introduce anything in your presentation or for evidence, we have to have a copy of that. Cell phones tend to be disruptive. So if you do have a cell phone, we ask that you turn it off, as my attorney's doing, or put it on vibrate. We ask that you don't have any conversations here in the gallery within the chamber. If you need to step out of the room for a break to take a call or need the restroom, it's down at the end of the hall. And if we have heard your item and made our decision, you are welcome to leave. You don't have to wait for a break or sit quietly. You're welcome to stick around with us and listen all afternoon. But as soon as we've approved or dealt with your item, you're welcome to leave. If we need to, we'll have a short break around 3 or 3:30 if needed. But again, I think we have a short agenda here today. So, yes. Yes. As noted in all of our agendas, while the board has 7 members, it takes an affirmative vote of at least 4 members present to grant any appeal or request. So as we only have 4 members here today, if we are to approve the item that you're after here, all 4 of us would have to be in agreement. So, we could begin a hearing and see how it's going, but before we take a vote on it, you'd have to decide if you want to stick with us or not. If you want to ask for a deferral to the next month's meeting, we can grant that too, when perhaps there'll be more board members here, which we usually are. We can never guarantee that there'll be a full 7-member board, however. But since we've just got 4 today, especially if you're not on the consent agenda, all 4 of us would have to vote yes. So you need to be really convincing. You have to meet all the conditions needed to grant that variance. So as we go through the agenda items, if you think you want to make a change or you'd like to have a brief discussion on it, we can certainly do that. But please keep that in mind. Does that sound okay, Roger? Okay, great. All right, well, let's first take a look at the consent agenda we've got. Bert, can you run us through what we've got there?
Yeah. On the consent agenda, right now we have items 1 and 2. Item 1 is a exception of a setback for the property at 4170 Greenwood Drive, and item number 2 is for 2 exceptions for the St. Joseph's Catholic Church and School at 3300 Easton Boulevard. Those 2 items are on the consent agenda. Then item number 3 is a variance requested by Casey's at 2150 East Army Post Road. The applicant's not in agreement with the staff recommendation, so they've asked to have that one discussed as a hearing item.
Okay, we can do that.
And then items number 5 and 6, the applicants are in agreement with the staff recommendations, and we have not received any objections to these 2. So if the board is comfortable with items 5 and 6, staff is comfortable moving these 2 to the consent agenda. And those are item 5 at 4140 East 14th Street, which is a special permit and variance to allow some barbed wire fence to remain that's been there for many years. Mm-hmm. And then number 6 is some variances for the Earl's Tire and Service Center to reconstruct their parking lot at 303 Scott Avenue.
Okay. All right. And Bert, if we were to move items 5 and 6 to the consent agenda, the applicants would have to comply with the staff recommendations you've got listed in the agenda items. And you've spoken with them on that. They are in agreement. Okay, that's good. Are there any members of the public here who wish to speak in opposition to the special permit and variance on item 5 at 4140 East 14th or the variances for item 6 at 303 Scott? Is there anybody who's not in favor of that would like to speak? Okay, and any concerns on the board about item 5 or 6?
I always have concerns about barbed wire.
Yeah.
Isn't this in a, can you show me on the map where it is?
Yeah, it's the Seneca property on the west side of East 14th Street, just south of Aurora.
Okay.
They have their industrial use on this portion of the property. And they have this large open space. It's on the same parcel, but this back area is zoned R160. There is a barbed wire, or a chain link fence with 3 strands of barbed wire around the perimeter. It's been there for many years. It may be grandfathered in, but I guess they can't prove that it has grandfather rights, so they just want to get this variance and special permit to clean that up. So
I am okay with that. There's another piece there's another property down the street.
Sure.
I was thinking that.
And Bert, in what I would call the highway district of Northeast 14th and 69 there, that barbed wire isn't directly easy to see.
It's a few hundred feet off the corridor.
And did you have comment cards in support?
I know we didn't comment cards in support on that one.
We didn't have any opposition, but you actually had some neighbors in support?
Yeah.
Okay, could you show that quick?
Sure.
Okay. So some of those are very near, or actually do border that western end of the property.
And then as for number 6, which is the Earl's Tire, we did not receive any comment cards, but we did get an email from the neighborhood association, the Historic East Village Neighborhood Association, in support. So,
Linda, any other thoughts then on that?
I'm fine.
You okay? Okay. All right, would somebody want to entertain a motion here for approving a consent agenda?
I would make a motion to grant the exceptions, variances, and special permits for items 1, 2, 4, and 5 on today's agenda.
1, 2.
5 and 6.
I'm sorry, 5 and 6. I just
And I'll second that. 1, 2, 5, and 6.
Okay, so on our consent agenda, we would be approving item 1, an exception at 4170 Greenwood Drive, item 2, an exception at 3300 Easton Boulevard, and a special permit and variance 4140 East 14th, and a variance at 303 Scott Avenue. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. So if you were here as an applicant for items 1, 2, 5, or 6, they've been approved. Again, check in with city staff probably business day tomorrow at the earliest, and they'll help you with any other permits that you need to carry out in any other direction. Okay, so that leaves us on
Item 3.
item 3 on the regular portion of this hearing today. Item 3 is a variance request from Casey's Marketing Company at 2150 East Army Post Road. And we'll let city staff open up this part of the hearing with a little background on it.
Yes, this property at the intersection of East Army Post Road and Indianola Road, fairly major intersection. It's becoming more major as development occurs out in that area. This convenience store for Casey's was built just prior to our design guidelines that are approved in our site plan ordinance for convenience stores. But it was a C1 district, which the C1 district generally allows 6 fueling locations, but on certain corridors within the city, it allowed 8. And so the site that's there now maximizes this number of fueling locations that's allowed in the C1 district. You can refer to the applicable section of your staff report for that provision in the zoning ordinance. In this case, they're now wanting to revise this to a site plan where they would add a fueling apparatus, each with the 2 fueling locations on either side of the current pump island canopy. So it would have these little, what I call wings, here on both the east and the west side. And so it would end up with a total of 12 fueling locations, which is within the exception level. I'm sorry, it's a variance because it's limited to the 8. So it's not treated like a setback provision where you could apply an exception when it's half the standard. In this case, it's indicated it shall be no more than, and so it's interpreted that this is a variance request. In reviewing this, we've looked at we look at the market and the model that Casey's falls within. It's on a high volume traffic way with East Army Post, and it's very similar to the same condition we would see in a C2 district, which is a highway commercial. So from a character perspective and the criteria, whether it's out of the essential character, it's very similar to what we would apply in a highway commercial situation, which would allow 12 fueling locations given this size of the property. In our current design guidelines for convenience stores, we require that a minimum of 20% open space be provided, or 1,000 square feet of open space per fueling location, and it exceeds both of those standards. So from the scale of this, it's not out of scale in terms of the character. One of the things that we are concerned about in terms of character is the fact that they're expanding this. We do want it to follow our design guidelines for the building and structures as well. And one of those elements in the design guidelines is that canopies should have columns that are treated with a durable material like brick or stone material. Well, the existing Casey's was built without this. But this is you're going half again, you're going 50% increase to what's going on here in terms of the intensity of the fueling activity. So we believe that this is justification enough to say this should meet those standards and that they should provide brick-wrapped canopy columns as a condition of this relief in order to remain in character. And again, this comes about due to the fact that you're intensifying the scale to some extent. The other thing I should point out is that standard will still be applicable and reviewable through the site plan procedure as well. So right now we're recommending it be a condition, and then the P&Z will have no option but to require that as part of the site plan. If you don't include that as a condition, then P&Z will have to make that determination and review of the site plan.
Okay.
Is that clear? Does that,
It's
any
clear.
question?
And
Okay.
the applicant objects to that.
I believe that they have some, I'll let them speak to it, but they've indicated from an engineering perspective that presents some challenges. I don't think it's impossible, but it may certainly involve more cost than when we made our recommendation. You know, we don't look at it in terms of the cost overall, as long as it's not completely prohibitive. We look at it in terms of the character, so. But I'll let them make their argument based on what they've determined from an engineering perspective. The other things is we want as conditions is compliance with the site plan and the building code standards, just as conditions to, and that just puts them on notice. We're going to apply those conditions anyway, but by putting them in the action, I think it makes it clear to anybody looking at the relief that those are requirements.
Other questions for Eric?
I can show you some photos as this currently is viewed from the intersection. That's looking northeast from going eastbound on Army Post there. This is within the site, so you can see how the canopy columns look at the current time. This is the consent map. Now I handed out some cards.
Cards over here.
Yeah.
What's north of there?
Was
Is
one of
that
the
a
red ones.
single-family home, or? There seems to be some complaints about,
There is a state kind of development that was there previous to the.
I drive by there all the time, but I just don't remember.
So you have even to the west and to the north, and then I
Right.
believe there's even a church just further north. I think those comments were operational in nature, not with
Right.
regard, although there's maybe the argument that this is intensifying that operational element that they're concerned about, so. Trying to see if these,
Does the name to the north line up with one of the card names there?
this one, Ron Snook, appears to be in this property here.
Okay.
And then the Fleischer is the one directly to the north.
And I think the cards relayed just some concern about number of cashiers at a register, length of wait time, and then one was about, there's a little bit of blowing trash. So again, as Eric said, maybe some operational questions and,
Yes, and so I suppose on some level, by adding more
Right.
fueling activity, that might worsen or
Sure.
become worse. Staff didn't really view it from that.
Right.
We believe that those things can be corrected operationally.
Right.
They aren't really directly as a result of the request.
all right. All right. Any questions for Eric? Eric, one brief one I would have. Just to the best of your knowledge, do you know if like surrounding suburbs with, since we have a lot of convenience stores obviously in the metro, do they require, bricked or fasciaed support
The answer to that
columns?
is yes, but I think they review it on more of a case-by-case type basis.
Okay.
We have specific design guidelines in our site plan ordinance that are
Citywide. Okay.
directly for convenience stores.
Okay, thank you. Okay, applicant or representative of the applicant?
Good afternoon. My name is Ed Pelds with Pelds Engineering Company,
Okay.
2323 Dixon Street, Des Moines, Iowa, 50306. Here representing Casey's General Stores on this matter. The only problem that we have with this request for the brick wrap columns is the fact that our structural engineer has indicated that the footings for the current canopy were not designed with the additional weight in mind of the brick wrap column. Now, with that said, the whole canopy would have to be removed. The existing columns would have to be removed, dug up, replaced with more structurally sound footings. Basically, I would shut down the whole operation for the construction period. What I do have is a picture of a very similar canopy in expansion that was done in Clive here recently.
Okay.
Now, they did not require the brick wrap columns as a part of that expansion. If it was a new site, we would see that and we would certainly follow those design guidelines, but we certainly don't feel that it would be necessary in this case. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions?
I just have a question. To add the new pumps, were you going to do anything to restructure the existing canopy or just use the existing canopy and then it was going to suffice for the additional pumps?
The structure of the canopy itself would be sufficient. I think they do plan on rewrapping it to have more of a look like this. I have some elevations here of it would have more of a clean look. I think it's getting rid of the brick, the fake brick look on it and whatnot.
Okay, but the area of the canopy, you're going to have some wings that kind of
Correct.
flare out, but you're not going to drop new poles down. It'll
There are
still
going to be
the-
2 new poles
There-
on
there-
each side.
There are?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And those will look similar then to the 4 existing?
Correct.
Okay,
It's going to be just like the image, right? That had wings on it.
Yep.
right,
It would be just like that.
okay. Do you have any other cosmetic improvements you'll be doing? Are you redoing any landscaping at the time or making any other changes?
No, I think all of the existing
Okay.
landscaping meets the
Okay.
requirements and whatnot.
Changes to any other fascia on the building or anything? New logos or anything?
Not as far as I know.
This is just pretty much about adding 2 pumps and winging out and dropping
Correct.
2
They did a
legs.
building
Okay.
addition there, what, 2 years ago?
Yep.
Is that right, Eric? And
Yeah,
then-
they were actually, and I didn't remember to point this out, this was actually the first site that came in through those design guidelines when they did an addition at the time.
Right,
So,
okay.
this has been through that process. At the time of the addition, they determined that it didn't require that the full site be brought into the compliance with
Okay.
design guidelines.
Okay.
When we looked at this, staff felt that this was 50% again as much as what's there. And so that's kind of how we gauged it
Sure.
in other situations from landscaping and other places in the site plan ordinance. That's sort of the trigger as to when we'd like to see those improvements made.
And Ed, I realize you're here representing this kind of on the technical engineering side, but some of the comment cards that we had didn't really go to the issue of how it visually would look, but more about, there was one card that says there's a lot of blowing trash. Can you give some feedback to Casey's on that?
I
or-
sure can. I can bring it to their attention. I do think we are improving the trash enclosure as part of the site plan to meet the current guideline. Is that
Okay,
correct?
From what I recall. yeah.
Yes.
I didn't get involved in the site plan.
Okay.
We also had the site plan submitted before it was determined this relief was
Okay.
necessary, so we do have that in.
I know with some folks they may be competitors, but some competitors in that business, they'll have there's somebody that goes around each day and checks the perimeter and picks up trash.
I will sure pass that along to
Sure,
Casey.
sure, and I realize
in email.
that's,
So,
that's all you can do, but when citizens have a concern, if we can kind of maybe pass that along a little, it helps.
absolutely.
Any other questions for Ed? Okay, all right, thank you, sir. Is there anyone here to speak in support of the applicant? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Are there any further comments from staff?
I just wanted to indicate that should you choose not to add those conditions,
Sure.
that doesn't preclude the plan and zoning from considering that under their
And/or
review.
require, right, okay, all right.
That this board doesn't have the ability to
Right.
give relief to the site plan.
Sure.
ordinance.
And if they do then require that,
They don't come back to the board.
right, right. And if Casey still didn't want to do it, they'd have to, get the council to overturn that? Pretty much.
That would be the
Yeah.
appeal
Okay.
process.
Pretty much if P and Z says to do it, unless they appealed it to the council,
Correct.
then it would stick. Okay. Okay, all right, well, let's go ahead and close the hearing and go to board deliberation. Thoughts?
I would say that,
I'm not speaking first.
I would say it's an improvement of the fascia change. I think it has a better appearance even with an expansion, so the fact that the columns are not wrapped in brick does not give me a high level of pain.
Okay, Linda?
I would agree also. I just hope that there's something in there that all trash has to be in an enclosed,
That's already a
which I would think, yeah.
Okay,
Now,
sure.
possibly.
Okay, well, as your acting chair, leave my comments for last. And you've heard me say this before. I drive by this business quite often, sometimes 2 to 4 times a day. And I've dropped in there many a time. It's the only gas station in that stretch, east of East 14th, a busy location. So if you're finding some ways to serve your customers better, I think that's great. Can't fault anyone for that. The way it sits away from the road, it does sit back a little bit. I think if you're adding 2 legs, much as Jake said, I don't really think that's going to detract from much. I understand what staff is putting out here. I think certainly if we were looking at a new store from square one, we'd probably want to see something a little different. But you're trying to make the site work and serve your customers. So I don't see an issue with it myself at this case. But if we choose to grant the variance, you'll still have to go to P&Z and see if they agree. So, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. All right, so are there any motions?
Trying to figure out how to word that you don't have to do the brick. Okay. I would move staff recommendation with the exception of striking number 1.
I'll second.
Do we want to strike 1 completely or just the portion relating to the brick veneer? Is there any relevance to the rest? I'll ask our attorney.
If you would just strike the part beginning with including, the rest is, again, just a restatement of just a notice, so to speak, of what's to come when they go through the site plan process.
Okay, I accept that amendment.
Okay, all right, is that still clear? Bert, Eric, you got that? Okay. All right, so we had a motion and a second? Okay, all those in favor of granting the requested variance, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you, Ed. You bet. Okay, item number 4 is Des Moines Public Schools, a request for a special permit variance and exception at 2824 East 24th Street.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this series of appeals would allow for installation of a new freestanding monument sign for the Garden Elementary School that would include an electronic reader board. The subject property is at the corner of Hull and East 24th Street, just to the east of the freeway. They're proposing to install this sign here. It's 8.17 feet tall by 8.25 feet wide, so it has a total area of 67 square feet. A school in our district is allowed to have up to 75 square feet of signage, so the overall area isn't of concern. It's just the fact that it's having a digital component and it's closer to the front property lines than it's allowed to be, and it's also, I believe, 2 inches taller than it's allowed to be. So, here's the layout. I'll put north to the top. The new sign would be in this location where the red line is. It would be 4 feet from the north property line along Hull Avenue and 20 feet from the front property line along East 24th Street. It would replace an existing sign that's in this location right here. The requested setbacks are necessary in order for it to be visible around these parking spaces here. The sign location is outside of the required vision clearance triangles. Since there are it's a 4-way stop signs at all 4 corners, They're required to have a 20-foot by 70-foot vision clearance triangle. The sign is outside of those, so and that's not an issue. Here's the photo from East 24th Street. The new sign would generally be in this location right there. This is just closer up to the corner. So you can see that it would be 4 feet back from the property line, so just roughly where this utility pole is. So you can see at the intersection it doesn't impact the visibility. And this is looking south from Hull Avenue. Again, the sign would be 20 feet from this property line and 4 from here, so it would generally be right about there. And then this is the sign that would be replaced. Again, here's the sign that they're wanting. The dimensions of the sign includes the entire sign because they have the static parts, the Des Moines School logo, and then the elementary school sign here. This is the digital component right here. It's 29 inches tall by 99 inches, which is 8 feet and a quarter wide. So it's really only 19 square feet of digital components. So here are the consent cards, all in support except one from this property up here that was in opposition.
And Bert, you may have just mentioned this, but since we've got the opposition card location notice, where will the sign actually be on the property? It'll be up in that corner there. Okay. All right. So they're fairly close in a way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Their backyard anyway.
Yeah. Since this property is a school, this sign's eligible to be considered by the board as a special permit. As a special permit, there's one of the criteria in the special permit says that any deviation from required bulk regulation shall be considered at the exception level relief as a practical difficulty rather than as a variance. So in this case, the board's only challenged with determining that this sign meets the test of a practical difficulty rather than a hardship. So staff does feel that the proposed sign meets the requirements. We feel that it would be in character with the school use. We don't feel it'll be detrimental to the surrounding properties as long as it's operated in accordance with 9 conditions. And I'll just go quickly through these. 1, that they have a brick base that matches the school. 2, it's limited to the dimensions as proposed. 3, the electronic components limited to the proposed dimensions. 4, the display area shall be static for at least 8 seconds between any changes in messages, and the sign shall not scroll, flash, or display video animation. 5, no lighting shall be used in any way in connection with any sign unless it is so effectively shielded to prevent beams or rays of light from being directed onto any portion of the main traveled way from the street. Number 6 is shall have an automatic dimmer control. Number 7 is shall be turned off between the hours of 9 p.m. and 7 o'clock a.m. 8, the sign shall not be within any vision clearance triangle. And 9, the sign shall be installed in accordance with the sign permit issued to a sign contractor. Any questions?
Okay.
I have a couple of questions, and part of it is a history lesson for me because I don't remember exactly. But I remember they came to us, I think it was North High, they wanted to do a sign. And the argument was, there's really no houses around there, there was no residential. And so we allowed them, did we allow a scrolling sign or just a lighted sign?
I think just an electronic
It seems to me
digital.
that we're evolving. And then I know we did Findlay School, we went to Lincoln High School, and I don't remember the others, but are we moving? It seems okay, I mean, as general, we don't like scrolling signs
Right.
in the city. We don't allow them. So now we've gone from just a standard sign to a lighted sign, and now they want to scroll. Are there other scrolling ones? Did we?
They don't want to scroll. We're saying that
They don't want
I
to.
don't believe they do. I can let him answer
Okay.
that for sure, but
So it-
we're just putting that in a,
You're putting that in there.
yeah,
make
just to
sure.
be sure, yeah. And we're trying to be more consistent on any time we have an electronic sign that we put that as a condition. Right now, the zoning ordinance already requires that of electronic signs, but,
But could we say no scrolling?
oh yeah, that's what this is saying, is no scrolling.
Well, I think, if
And
I
I
can
don't-
paraphrase what you're getting at, if the message changes periodically, do you consider that scrolling?
No, well,
Aren't there certain like seconds?
Scrolling to me means there's motion going on.
And I
Right.
can let Sue Ann speak
Right.
to that, but she's
And
been.
no motion at all, but even the frequency of when the message changes, what city staff says is no less than 8 seconds.
Right, and that means it can't flash or
Right.
jump around or anything.
So there can't be any movement but the message can change once every 8 seconds.
Right,
So-
and then it has to be an instantaneous change.
Yeah, so time temp changes to concert tonight at 7. Time temp, concert at 7. And we can ask the
I
school.
think some of the other signs we just allowed lighted signs. I don't remember for sure.
Yeah.
thought they were all electronics.
I know the North High was an electronic sign.
Well, it was electronic, but it had the same message all the time, is what you're saying, or it changed once a day or something.
Seems like that's the standard these
Yeah,
days.
yeah.
Much as we might not like.
Well, we'll see what the applicant says, then maybe we can ask some more questions.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
That scrolling thing is.
Okay, applicant or representative of the applicant?
Good afternoon, Doug Odie, 1917 Dean Avenue, representing the Des Moines Public Schools Operation Department. We're here today to discuss a sign for Garton Elementary School. This idea for this sign originated at Garton Elementary School by the school and the staff, and is also endorsed by the PTA, and then, if approved, would be funded partially by the parent-teachers organization. You were mentioning other signs in the district. The district is definitely moving towards a standardized monument-type sign at those locations that we go to replace signage at. North High School was one. Edmonds is maybe the other one that you were remembering recently. We approved a sign that was very similar to this, or I should say the board approved a variance for a sign very similar to this. So we're trying to go to a standardized look across the district, both for continuity and also perhaps a branding type look for the district. So as schools request and we get the opportunity to work with individual schools and getting the signs designed and approved as appropriate, we're going to be moving towards a more standardized design. We certainly realize, because of some of the visual areas here, we're moving a little bit closer to the property line than even we would like to be, but with the tree line that's running down Hall Avenue from the west, as well as the parking in those locations, we have to move out towards the street in order to make this sign visible. And the current sign is on 24th Street, and that is not the avenue where most of the people see. So we'd like to try to get it to Hall Avenue where more people can look at it and be able to see the messages that the school wish to present to the parents and the community. So we are looking towards having that done here in the spring. There are some representatives of the school here that will speak a little more specifically about their desire and their need for this sign, or what they can accomplish by using this sign. So I'll let them speak to those aspects of the request.
Okay. Doug, if we maybe got a few questions for you here first. Any questions?
Are you Dean or Doug?
Doug.
Doug. I wrote down.
Hard to hear with the drilling here.
Okay, Doug, you mentioned working on some type of standardized design. You mentioned that you were planning to work on that, or maybe going to work on that, or do you have
This is
going
this
for
is
that?
a
Because I think we would like I'm sorry. I think it would be helpful if we knew that the Des Moines Public Schools were working towards some kind of standardization for their designs, because every time we get one of these, it seems like, well, maybe it's the same and maybe it's a little different. And just, referencing Linda's comments, I started to think, okay, where were they and what were they? And it just seems like we're getting some smattering of them. And I have a feeling we're going to be getting more of these. So I think if you could come up with some kind of a plan, that would be helpful for me anyway.
You mean a plan as to where they're going, or a standardized design?
More of a standardized.
This is, we have worked with the communications area of the school district. We have worked through this, and this is the plan that we would be moving forward with message board type signs as schools have the desire and resources become available to make those changes. So what you see on this one is very similar to what we did on Edmonds, meaning similar, meaning it's maybe a little bit different size and a little bit, but we are moving towards this as a standardized design for our message boards.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Thanks for the
Good question.
clarification. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
appreciate. Yeah.
Are you in agreement with the staff recommendations?
Yes, I don't think we have any concerns with the recommendations. We had questioned maybe trying to get a little bit earlier in the morning for message for parents that are arriving earlier, but I think we can survive with the 7 o'clock timeframe, so.
I do have
As far as scrolling, the message would change, but we're not looking to scroll a message up and around.
Right, no animation per se.
No animation, no, we're really looking, Rita, aren't we, just for the ability to get messages up and change those messages periodically?
And Doug, since you mentioned, kids coming early, what, an average elementary kid does not show up at 7 a.m. Are there some preschool, before school programs, daycare?
We need to speak to that.
Okay, all right, then we can do that when she's up. And to your knowledge, is this school used as a voting precinct or any other, or again, should I just ask her?
Ask her.
All right, I was going to ask
Do they
her.
vote at
Okay, all
kindergarten?
right. If we need you again, then we'll bring you back up. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, then I'm going to consider you to be part of the appellant here rather than somebody speaking support. You're actually here as the appellant?
Yep.
All right, step on up. Okay, just your name and address as well then.
Renita Lord, 2820 East 24th Street. To answer some of the questions, Garton Elementary has about 603 students. School does, students start arriving around 8 o'clock, a little bit before. However, we do also have Metro kids, which then parents are dropping students off around 6 a.m. in the morning.
Okay.
Time-wise, maybe going a little earlier due to we have students that are dropped off when we have no school due to weather or 2-hour delay, so it would be nice to have it a little earlier for some parents if it's needed. I'm the principal of elementary. I've worked with PTA. One of the reasons why we're looking at this new sign, our current sign, it's going out there and putting letters in individually. It's difficult to change, especially throughout the winter. We view the sign as a way to communicate with our parents and the neighborhood also. It would allow us to be more updated, give them the most current and accurate information that we could. And we also would consider the sign for neighborhood use. We're really working on establishing communication with the neighborhood association, so the sign could also be used for neighborhood information as well.
Cool. Any questions for Renata?
I just have one quick question. You indicated that some of the students are dropped off earlier than 7 a.m. In the evening, are there a lot of activities all the way up to 9 p.m. at night at the school? Do you use it for a voting precinct? Do you use it for neighborhood meetings or some other things? Or is 9 p.m. kind of the cutoff, or?
We have a program that runs till 5 o'clock. We have Metro Kids start till 6:45. We do have the school in use with various, through community ed.
Concerts? stuff like that?
Concerts, yep.
Right.
We have some.
Is it a voting precinct?
No, it's not.
No, okay.
No.
All right.
Well, I think I was just referencing
Yeah.
the neighbor comment.
Sure,
That, I don't know if it was a visual clutter. I don't know if the neighbor's here to speak in opposition. I guess I could wait to see, but I didn't know if that was visual clutter for him
Mm-hmm.
or her, or if the lighting was an issue. But I think the best that we can minimize for the neighborhood, that's,
Yep.
just solves a lot of issues
Yep.
for a lot of people.
And I don't want to get back you in a corner on this or anything, for the future, but do you think you'd have just maybe, like, it would just change like 2 messages at a time, or are you going to have like 4 or 5 and it's something different every 8 seconds?
We would probably highlight maybe 2 to 3 messages
Okay.
of like maybe the week
Sure.
that we really want parents to know, or maybe go into the next week.
All right, so if you're rotating messages, then probably you wouldn't make it change any greater than, or less than 8 seconds, which is
Yes.
what staff recommendation is here, but it might change on that tune. Okay. Like every 8 to 10 seconds, you might change the message
Yes.
then. It would, okay. All right, any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Anybody else to speak in support of the applicant?
Hello, I'm Angela Julander. My address is 2412 Mansfield Drive, Des Moines 50317. I'm the president of the PTA at Garton for the last couple years, and we, the parents and the school, are in support of this sign. Our main goal as a PTA is really lately has been trying to get more parent involvement, and this was one way that we're really trying to do it, is so they know what's going on. We're trying to get communication out to them, and this is one way that the parents have said that they would really like to be able to see it. We want it over there in the corner because our parents pick up on that side, and then they could see it, or the other, and that should hit almost every direction. So when parents are dropping off and picking up, they'll be able to know what's going on.
Okay.
So,
All right.
thank you.
One question.
Uh-huh.
Would you prefer that the sign not be lit between the hours of 9 p.m. and 7 a.m.? Or do you think it would be better to have it not lit between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m.? Since you've got some people coming in the morning before 7,
Right.
but really nobody after 7, I think she said.
Yeah,
Does it matter?
for me, I just live a couple streets away. To me, that would be, I would like that better, because I think a lot of, even parents that aren't taking their kids to school in the morning might be going to work or driving by, and they would see it. You know, a lot of people go to work at 6:30 or so, or would be driving by. Coming home, I would think most of our parents would have driven by 8 o'clock, so personally, I would think the 6 to 8 would be a better time frame.
All right. Thanks, Angela.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else to speak in support? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Okay, hearing none. Any further questions for staff or comments from the city?
I guess I'd point out that a lot of our conditions that we're recommending are sort of based on reviews that we've done in the recent past, a lot of it coming about as regard of the digital signs, the outdoor advertising signs.
Okay.
So we've looked into the, what's appropriate in terms of the duration of message and so forth. And this is very consistent with that. It's also very consistent with how Sue's inspectors are able to enforce these. So I think over time we've gotten kind of focused in on a set of conditions that are appropriate. I wouldn't get too hung up about what we did for a school, 2 or 3 years ago, because this is evolving so fast with the industry, the sign industry. I think the school's taken a lot of steps to become more focused on how they're going to do their design, and from a branding perspective. The one thing I do want to note is they mentioned use for greater neighborhood usage. I think if you want to allow that, I think you need to add that in as one of the things that you would allow, because the way we would normally view that, it would be considered an off-premises kind of activity. So I think by special permit, you have that flexibility. So if you want that, if you intend for that to be used in that fashion, I think you need to have that in the order somehow.
But we've not allowed that kind of verbiage on other signs, I don't believe.
I don't know if it ever really came up, and whether, I have no knowledge as to whether they're using them in that fashion. But I think knowing that there's some intent to that effect, and it was stated in the hearing that you'd need to acknowledge it somehow.
Okay.
Either, I don't see any issues the way they've described it, as long as it's, partnered neighborhood functions. I'd be worried if they started putting Coca-Cola or, something up like that. But
I think maybe people could just find the school, but not
Right.
really
Okay.
advertise.
yeah, and certainly if the neighborhood's meeting at the school that night or something, I don't think that's an issue. But if they're trying to, scrub day at another location for the neighborhood or something, if you're, I'll let the board determine if that's appropriate or not, but I'd say if, with the board being silent, that we wouldn't really allow that in our enforcement, so.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you want to ask?
I wanted to ask Gary, do you feel that is it appropriate to adjust the times? Or is it better for zoning enforcement if we keep the times the way it is? Is that what
I think
you're
if
saying?
you're evaluating it based on this location and the neighbors, the impact on the surrounding neighborhood, it might be different in a different location. So I think that's, open for your
That's okay.
determination as to what's appropriate.
I mean, I think everybody'd be okay with the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, certainly different, middle schools and elementary schools, their timing for start and stop is different. So I think you have to sort of evaluate that on a case by case. We're probably going to always come to you with a 9 to 7 just because it's kind of a safe zone. But if you think there's room to stretch that out, that's fine.
Okay.
I think the board can look at each case on its own merits to that effect.
All right. Thank you, Eric. And in our order of procedure, although Eric didn't necessarily counter anything the applicant said, the appellant does have 3 minutes for a rebuttal. And I think in this case, since we do have a few questions, would one of you or want to maybe step back up and maybe we can ask you a question or two about some of this community notice stuff?
Why don't you come up with me, maybe you can answer.
Yeah, and since we've already got your name on the record, that's fine, you just step up. As an example, does a neighborhood association meet at the school now?
No.
No.
It's not looked as an advertisement, just like if the neighborhood association
Right.
would like to have something up there about their next meeting or something to
Right,
that effect,
right.
but not to advertise for any
Sure,
businesses.
sponsors,
surrounding
or,
us.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, which I don't think that we'd be inclined to approve that.
Yeah.
But I guess from my perspective, if you have an activity or event at that school that is open to the public, like a concert, obviously, with children, or if you had a neighborhood meeting at the school, those publicly accessible, or things of that nature, I could see that being on the sign. Now, as Eric mentioned, if you start advertising that Scrub Day is coming up, or things of that nature, to what degree would you be doing this where, it turns into a community billboard then or something? And I'm not sure if our members have a concern about that one way or the other.
It's not our intent to make a habit out of that. I mean, would there be an opportunity that maybe there's a
Here and there.
neighborhood blood drive or
Sure.
something like that you'd want to advertise? I think, something like that might pop up in it, but
Right.
our purpose is for the school purpose, and if there's a restriction and we can't do that, we're happy to live with that. If we have the latitude of making an occasional community
Right.
thing, that'd be great with
Right.
us as well, so.
Thoughts or anything you want to ask them while they're here then?
I don't have anything to ask them. I think a school's a natural place for a neighborhood to look to what's going on. So if they
Okay.
advertised a blood drive or whatever, I don't think that's,
Okay.
it's not changing the amount of signage. It's not changing any of the impact, in my opinion.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, thank you. I think it's time for us to discuss here, so, all right. We'll close the public portion and go to board deliberation. So Jake, you were kind of leading here with something, so.
I just think a school's a natural place for a neighborhood, so to be kind of a focal point for information, especially if they're driving by. So I think as long as it doesn't turn into something that exceeds what is listed in staff recommendations in terms of the cadence of the message changing, then it doesn't
Okay.
matter much to me what it says, as long as it's not an advertisement.
Right. Yeah, so if it's information for the general public, community-based information, you wouldn't have a problem with it?
Yeah.
Right, it's not advertising.
Right.
Okay. Thoughts? Because I will give Eric credit here on this. If we do want to allow for that or think that's fair to include that, we'd probably want to have an amendment here.
But can we just not do anything with it and then they can do what they want?
We have to say it to allow
Yeah,
it.
yeah. If it's not specifically school-related, I
Yeah,
think we would be
I
stretching our
think the way
bounds.
we would enforce it right now, it should be related to the premises.
Right.
But I can see that, maybe if you limit it to philanthropic, activities, partnering with the school or in partnership with the school.
Pertinent to the immediate neighborhood and community.
That still limits it enough that we're not getting, the band candy bar sale with their brand name on it or something,
Right,
something to that level.
I
Right.
think we're kind of going down a slippery slope.
Yeah. I mean, you can't really regulate content under under the case law that we know.
Right.
But we can go between off-premise and on-premise, and I just want to be clear if there's a few things that you feel are appropriate, that we should allow for that or speak to that in the order.
Does Sue Ann have something?
We certainly don't want this to be an issue because it's for the schools. So
Sure,
if
we
it's
got
an
you.
issue with any board member,
Okay, I guess in a way, I'm not saying we're trying to help you out, but we just want to make sure we've discussed it for you. You know, because there's nobody waiting behind you, so. Sue?
Chair, members of the board. From an enforcement standpoint, we are going down a slippery slope.
Okay.
If it's related to school activities and it's not advertising a brand or a specific Girl Scout cookie sold here or something like that, I don't have any problem with it.
Okay.
If it's information related to school-related events.
Right.
I think if we start opening it up to community events, you can get all sorts of
Sure.
other things in there, and I would hate to have to be the
Okay.
person that
Right.
has to interpret that.
Be a meanie. If it's an event occurring at the school, though, that's community-based, if, let's say they were the voting precinct and it said vote here today, that's okay, because it's related to an
It's related to
likely
activity
normal
at the-
activity.
at
All
the
right,
school.
okay.
I don't want to make this harder on enforcement, so.
Okay, all right. And I think we have the intent from the applicant there. They, you know, you're doing a great job for your community, but if you kind of stay between the lines on your own, I doubt whether you're going to have an issue here, so. Okay,
And
yes, Cindy?
Sue Ann sat down, but I don't
She
want it to
cannot.
be a compliance issue either, but in terms of the hours, I just think we need to kind of fudge on the hours just a little bit here. And is that going to be an issue if this school has these hours and this school has those hours? I don't want it to be a compliance issue.
I am not worried about that. If we get a complaint that it's on at 5:30 in the morning, I can certainly go out at 5:30 in the morning. Or shoot them an email saying, hey, you know, if you're starting to operate outside the hours, I'm sure an email will take care of it.
So you're okay with that?
I'm not
I just
worried about that at
Don't want
all.
to create another complaint.
And I agree, certain schools have different
Yeah.
hours of operation. I was the mom that dropped the kid off at 6:30 in the morning, you know, and had to be there, and information at that time was probably the only time I was going to get it.
Right.
So I don't have any problem with that.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue Ann. Okay, so it looks like, doesn't look like we need to put an amendment in there for this community signage. We'll stick with what we've got. We've got 9 items. However, do we want to look at modifying item number 7 for the time?
I would move staff recommendations with the change to number 7 to say the electronic component of any sign constructed shall not be lit between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. I mean, in the wintertime, it's dark at 6 in the morning. So
Right.
let's do that and then.
Right. Okay.
call it good.
Okay.
I'll second that. That was a vote.
Okay. All right. We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor to grant the requested appeals, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you very much. Keep up the good work over at Garton.
Wow, milk, it's just.
Okay, now, we got a couple things that we've got to do here yet, and Bert may have something. Let's just pause for a moment until our staff gets back up here.
This is a record.
Okay, we've got to approve our minutes from last month. Who was here last month and who was not?
I don't think I was.
Okay, so you can't vote. Do I have a,
Motion to approve last month's meeting.
do I hear a second?
I was here, wasn't I?
I think so.
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor of the 3? Aye.
Aye.
Oh, I can't.
Okay, now the next thing we have to do without great fanfare here, our normal elections for this board are in April, and those will still occur. But with Bill's absence, since he was the chair and I'm the vice chair, we have to determine who our chair will be. First item, who our chair would be for the next 3 months until we get to April. So if anybody would like to do it, feel free to nominate someone or nominate
I
yourself.
would like to nominate Mel Pins to be the
Second.
Okay, so we have one motion and a second for Mel Pins. Any other nominations for chair? Okay, nominations are closed. Huh? Cindy in a second.
I think we all made the motion.
We have no other nominations. All those in favor say aye.
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 I'm only voting to help it carry unanimous. Okay.
Good job. Thanks.
Now, that brings up a secondary thing. We need a vice chair for the next 3 months, and I would like to make a motion to nominate Linda Westergaard.
I will second that.
Okay,
That
are
was in
there
my motion.
any other nominations for the vice chair?
I was just going to nominate Brooke since he's not here.
Oh,
That is usually how you get elected to neighborhood president
Good
positions to
thought.
begin a municipal service career. All right, all those in favor of Linda for vice chair say aye.
Aye.
Aye, carried unanimously.
Linda will.
All right, so Bert, we have minutes taken care of. We have our officers until our regularly scheduled April meeting. Is there any other business we need to tend to? Okay, all right, meeting adjourned.
Nice job, Mr. Chair.
Now, if I average this.